I'd just like to mention the influence that coaches have. Um, it's really how you coach influences them and who they become. And I think the importance of understanding why you coach and how you coach in terms of your purpose of coaching tends to provide a sense of direction for the team. And sports have become a business, and sports, as we talk about it, is a sport. But there's a point at which minor hockey is treated like a business, and outcomes have become more distracting. Winning has become more distracting, and losing sight of the process, which is the purpose of playing, doing the right things to be the best you can be, become lost. And I think what you're both saying is we're speaking to the choir here. And the coach is the one that leads, and he may have the best intentions and he may do everything the right way, but at some point he might even be steamrolled because the people in charge, whether they're volunteer leaders or corporate leaders, have a different agenda, a different purpose, and they don't really understand the way of being your best in terms of adhering to the values that of leadership and playing a sport and becoming a better leader through playing a sport. So I don't know if that makes sense here. I'm getting a little philosophical and roundabout in it, but um, I think each of you can talk about players you've coached. And Peter, you can reshare that story of you're taking the seniors at university out for supper.
I was just saying that at that level, I mean, I think we get to that level as, like you said, you try to teach and try to train kids and understand like what it means to be a leader. But um, I would always try to simplify it once I got to the university level with those guys because they're supposed to be older and supposed to know something, right? And I would always liken it. I would always liken it to a good father, and I would mention to them. So in my definition of that was when I was growing up, my dad made sure that we had, we had the shoes, the clothing, that we were warm, that we were fed, and we were taken care of. And when it came for mealtime, my dad was the last one always to eat because he made sure we had our food on the table and we were all good to go. And I had to have a tradition where I'll be doing it one more time because I got two seniors left on my old team. But I take the seniors out at the end of every year when they're ready for graduation. And we went to lunch, and the captain this year, um, it was very noticeable. I was telling Wally, the meals came. His was one of the first or second meals, maybe third meal. He didn't touch his food until everyone else had their food. Then he began to eat. And to me, that honestly, in all the years I've coached, that was probably one of the most satisfying moments I've ever had. Just seeing the kid connected the dots. So that was really really big, and it's interesting with the whole thing with the captaincies, right? Like when you get to the higher levels, and um, from your experience with all that you've done, you know, as at the university level, I hear coaches saying, I just I don't know who my captains are going to be this year. I don't think I have anybody. my first thought is I pause for a second and then I say to myself, who have you been recruiting? Like what are your parameters for recruiting? Because this should not be part of it, not who's going to be my captain, but the type of individual I get on my team. Because to me, that's a little horrifying that I've got 24-year-old men on my team, and I don't know if anybody on my team can actually be a leader. So I think you have to look within a bit for sure on that one. But you also have to start to realize that, well, maybe, and to your point, maybe when these guys come in as freshmen, we should be doing more about teaching actual what leadership is so that maybe we can get it to grow and develop. So when these guys are maybe juniors, seniors, sophomores, maybe, that they can actually be someone say, you know what? I know that person X, Y, Z, whatever it may be, can be leaders and can be captains. Because to me, that was when I heard that, I just kind of shook my head like, I don't understand what you got going on here. And then for the younger levels, like you said, I think that's the best example. Like you said, I agree 100%. Pee-wees, you don't need a captain. But what you do need is if you got 15 players on your team, you need 15 players that understand what leadership is so that maybe when they get to that next level, now you do have some candidates. So I think it is a teaching process for sure, but overlooked too. Too easily overlooked because to Wally's point, we're now so all consumed with wins and losses and how does my team look and all the things that really at the end of the day don't matter for the kids as human beings in their development.
Right.
Peter, you had talked about, and it was a really great example. I think it was young players coming into a room and there being a cleaner on top of one of the desks and paper towels. Can you share that?
Yes, we were talking about one of the things we used to do is community service. And again, I love details. I mean, to the point where I occasionally drive family members insane with it. But I really like details. I think they make the difference in everything we do. So we used to do some community service and we would go to a school and something as simple as cleaning desks. So paper towels and Windex. And you could see, and there was an individual that would say, hey, why don't you three guys grab the Windex and towels? You do that half of the room. We'll do this half of the room. Just observing a little detail like that, like naturally, that's someone that already understands the idea of what leadership is in organization. Like that's somebody you want to keep an eye on, if nothing else. And just little things like that, just keying into that, maybe it's something you're walking through the rooms at a younger level and a kid says, oh man, I forgot my clear tape. And the first kid that pops up and says, hey, I got some clear tape, here you go. Because for some reason, tape in a locker room to players can also be treated like gold, it seems. Like you have it, but you don't want to tell anybody that you have it because that's your tape. You don't want to share it. But the individual that will toss you a roll and say, here you go. Little things like that, little keys like that, I think are interesting to me.
I think when you're in a team sport like we are, to ultimately to be successful, it takes everybody's got to have a part in it, and not everybody can score goals, and only a couple of them can play goalie. So you got a lot of guys in between there that need to be, and so what is leadership, especially with the younger players. You've got a lot of kids, for instance, that don't want to block shots, but you'll get some that will. And so I talked to him and said, so let's say you're a defenseman and you're a second-year defenseman and you're playing with a first-year defenseman. Who can help your partner become better at the things you guys need to do, like block shots and like, whatever. And so you can lead, you can have an army of one next to you. You can be a leader of one, or you can be a leader of 20. And the other thing we did when I was coaching high school was, we had 9, 10, 11, and 12-year-old, 12th grade kids in the locker room. And, the older boys, when I first started at that school, we had a couple seniors, and I said, well, I had lunch with them. I said, how are we going to get connected to the younger boys? And they go, well, it's not a problem. We already know them, and we're friends with all of them, because it was a pretty small school. And then I think I've told the story before. We got to an away game, and our senior captain, one of them, I went in the locker room, and he had broken something in his hand. So he had a cast on it, but he was playing with a cast. One of the other kids forgot his shin pads back at school. And this kid just, I'm just standing there, and I look over, and David's taking his shin pads off. He'd already gotten dressed, and he was taking them off, and he walked down and handed them to the kid that had less injuries than him and said, you play. Team needs you more than they need me. And so I was like, wow. At the end of the year, I had a conversation with everybody except the seniors. And I said, let's talk about captains for next year. Let's just talk about it. And who would be your ideal leader? And all of it. Well, David, just because was just a great leader. So, players instinctively know who are good leaders. And I think we need to ask them who your leaders are. Who do you respect as a human being and as a team guy that cares about everybody else in the program? And that's so. This is what coaches don't get paid to do.
Right.
But I think
And where's the education maybe on that piece for the coach as well, right? Like it's an easy thing to me. Maybe it's not easy, but to me it's an easy thing. So you have the individual there, right? My partner won't block shots, right? My partner won't block shots. Coach, what do I do? What do I do? You know what? You just walk up to your partner and you say, hey, you got to block some shots. And the kid's like, I don't want to do that. All you have to do is look him in the eye and say, I'd block a shot for you or anybody else on the team. And if that kid is a human being, that will resonate in some fashion. And I guarantee you at some point that kid is going to try to block a shot. But those are the kinds of things, maybe it comes from just, and I'm proud of this, but maybe it comes from being old, right? And just learning life's experiences. But again, like teaching coaches to understand what leadership is, like it's a great point. How do we teach the young kids to become leaders? But especially through the youth level, how do we teach adults to become leaders who potentially are not really receptive because they feel perhaps because they become an adult already that they get a pass on that. You're not going to teach me how to be a leader. I'm an adult. I'm married. I got kids, whatever. I'm all set. Like, how do we get the adults to buy in to what leadership actually is and how they can teach it? And maybe it's because I'm working with a local youth organization. This conversation is great. So maybe that's something that I introduce to them before the season starts when we have our meeting in late summer is, what do you think a leader is? And how can you teach leadership to your team? Give me examples. And I'm pretty sure in the beginning, at least, that room's going to be pretty quiet.
I agree. Imagine if this expands and by the time they get to you, Peter, you've got a whole room full of leaders. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, how much fun with that? Because that just take the hockey out of it. You've created and helped create individuals that are going to be successful. I mean, the hockey is good. You're going to take care of itself because it's hard for people that have that mindset to not become good at what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's that old theory of, forming, storming, norming, and performing, the cycles that teams go through. And it's actually an old business concept from the 50s. But most where in the forming stage, of course, it's the coach who has to select the players. If there's more players available than you can handle. And then you go into the storming phase where players are now on the team, but oh gosh, I don't want to play wing. I want to play center. I don't want to do this. I want my locker over here. I want to be on the power play. I want to be the penalty kill. And the coach kind of has to step in and kind of continue to drive the team through that process. And it's a communication process. Could take a week. It could take all. I've seen it take all season because the coach likes the team storming all the time. But then at some point they settle in and you go into a norming way where the coaches can step back a little bit and let some of the minor disputes within the team get sorted out within the team by the leaders on the team. But performing teams, the players just kind of take over. And as you achieve milestone goals that the team has, and they'd be performance goals, they set new ones for themselves. So you win, you win your district, you win your region, you go to the state tournament and you win the state tournament, for instance, in Minnesota. Most teams end up in the performing, in the norming stage, where not everybody's fully engaged, but there's no real issues. But and that's where probably 95% of the teams end up. But when you get a team that's in a performing stage where the players, as coaches, you just step back and tweak here and there. That's an amazing experience as a coach. I've only had in 50 years, I've only had a handful of teams like that. And it's a very rewarding experience for all the players too. So you coach hard, you practice hard, you coach hard. At some point, where do you allow now the leaders on your team to actually lead? And it's coach ego that decides some of that, right?
100%. Wally and I were talking about that, right? We were talking about it, I think, before he came on, that the best, if you will, bosses I've ever had didn't have big egos. And I think that's a killer, be you in the corporate world, be you in the business world. I mean, you may be great in the boardroom, you may be great with the other egotists, but the people that actually have to work for you don't want to work for you, and generally will do the minimum because they just don't think that you would throw them the life preserver if they were going overboard. It's the same thing for players too. It's the same thing for players. If they feel the coach is making it about him and always about his decisions and everything about what he says goes without any kind of input, you're not going to have a very good team. So it's exactly what you're saying. I mean, because it's not this. The world has evolved in a good way, where everyone wants to be included. But when you begin having inclusion, that also means you have to be willing to listen to dissenting opinions as well. Otherwise, you're actually not inclusive. So
I agree 100%. And the last, 4 years, I guess, that every team I've coached, it's been the first year I've coached those kids. And my experience tells me that it's the second year you coach players, you have the greatest, you are a far better relationship with those players the second year. And of course, you're coaching them for 4 years, maybe.
yeah.
So I always thought, second year is good, third year pretty good. That senior year, you don't have to talk to them too much. You got to got to pay attention to the other players on the team, because we only have so many stories, and we only have so many ways to coach. And after 3 or 4 years, they've kind of seen all the tools in our toolkit. But I was asked a few years ago, and I say this with humility, that the majority of the teams I've ever coached have had great, have outperformed expectations. And I never knew why. I couldn't figure it out. And I said, there has to be a reason. I mean, there's only so many power plays. There's only so many D-zone things. There's only so many things, and everybody, so I'm not like a hockey genius. I'm not an X and O's genius that can out coach that part of the game. But I guess it's because I out coach them in how I build relationships with all the players on the team and with the team as a whole. And it's just the way I do it. It's not like I have a master plan for it. But I just, I love the game, and I love the kids that play the game. And I tell them that. I said, I love you guys. I mean, you're like my family. You're like my own kids. And sometimes I'm going to say no. I'm going to celebrate every success, and I'm going to be there crying with you when we fail together.
Yeah, that's a great philosophy. I mean, the idea that I'll always listen to you. It doesn't mean I will do what you say. We can agree to disagree, but understand I will always hear what you have to say. And that in and of itself, I think, is an issue with young people today. I don't know that they necessarily get that consistently. So that if you can consistently bring that to them into their lives, I think they'll love it. And I think, yes, in athletics, you will be successful when you can bring that concept in, because you genuinely cared. It really matters, right? That saying about Maya Angelou, and I don't think I'll have it 100% correct, but I'll paraphrase it, that people will sometimes remember what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. And make everybody feel part of the team. Go back to the blocking shots. When a kid blocks a shot, I mean, we recognize it from the bench while the game's going on. Hey guys, you see that black shot? That's awesome. Look at that. And I tell them every time 8 shots get blocked, we've saved a goal against. It takes 8 goals to score. 8 shots to score a goal is the average. It's the average in the National Hockey League. Is the average. Well, some teams in the National Hockey League need more than 8, but that's but that's a pretty consistent stat through hockey. 8 shots, 1 goal. If you block 8 shots, you've saved a goal against. And it's not just up to the D; it's up to the forwards to block shots, especially when we're penalty killing. Those forwards on top have got to be able to get out and get in front of and get in front of that puck when that defenseman's trying to shoot. And that is so valuable. It counts so much in terms of team and team camaraderie, because the other players recognize it and then they want to do it. If the coaches recognize it, then they want the coach to recognize them too, and they'll go out and do it. And then they start complimenting each other for doing it. It's like so cool.
Yeah.
And then they just play better.
Yep. We had that too when I coached prep school. We had this group of 5 guys that were let's say scoring challenged, playmaking challenged, but you know what? They became the best penalty killers we had. When they came back to the bench after a shift on the PK, it was like they had just scored a goal. The boys were that excited about it because they were blocking shots, clearing pucks, again, doing whatever it took. And that was they found that, and it was just awesome. It was just so much fun to watch. And that was a really good team that year. We went pretty far.
Yeah. So it's, you know, the old thing, you start with a lump of clay and you start to mold it through the season till you hopefully it now looks like a piece of art at the end.
Yeah, yes, yeah, and it's exactly what you're talking about, especially like how like it's 4-year process, right? It's like taking like this clump is a lump of clay, and you turn it into a cup, and finally by the time it gets to that 4th year, you're just calmly drinking out of it every day because you know it's reliable, you know it'll be there for you.
I think it's cool. It's great
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
What else is on your mind there, Wally? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think he's on the phone.
He's talking to somebody. He's
Probably
talking to somebody on the phone.
talking to his broker.
No phones in the locker room, Wally.
Yeah, put the phone in the basket.
It's too funny.
Yeah, it is. You could tell him.
I gotta go off mute, Wally.
You.
You're muted.
Hell, you had mentioned, and I'm sure Peter, you the same thing. You've coached teams that have, in your mind, overachieved, and I think we've all had successes in terms of wins and losses. We've overachieved doing things the way we do. And I've got 2 words that probably mean more to leadership, um, being captains, being a coach, being a teammate. And the 2 words, and I'd like you to think about them and over your years of coaching and leading, how they've helped you and how they worked into you being able to be the best you can be. The 2 words are trust and respect. So, how have you gained the trust and respect of your players, possibly of your parents, of the people who are in positions of authority to support you or let you go?
Well, those are interesting questions or, you know, words. It's my observation, having coached a lot of teams over the years, that when you, especially when you start with a new group, but also when you've got new players coming in, for some reason or another, they know pretty quickly if you have any idea what you're talking about and if you care about them. And then if you've been there for a while, the players in your program, as they come into it at the bottom, you know, like in my case now, I'll have some players on my team this year that I coached last year, and I've already spent some time this spring with 2nd-year players that'll probably be on the team, and we've already got a conversation going on. They're getting to know me, and I'm getting to know them. So, but if the players come to conclusion the coach is not good, or is just another screamer and yeller, you know, you're not going to get optimal performance out of that team. And so, you know, our players down here, I hope it's the same in Canada. I mean, after every practice, they come over, they skate by and, you know, give you a knuckle bump and say, thank you, great practice. Now, I don't know if they do that all, but I think that's pretty common. And when they leave the locker room, they do the same thing. They say, thanks, coach. Win or lose, they say, thanks, coach. Appreciate you. And so they've been schooled. Maybe they learned this in school too. I don't know. I like that way that they behave. And all my high school teams that I coached, when we would stop for meals, we'd get a lot of compliments from the restaurant we were at on how well behaved everybody was and how polite they were. Maybe that's why we didn't win as many games. I don't know. but we had a great reputation for being, civilized human beings, and people were always happy to welcome us back, which to me again those are life lessons that the kids need to make. What was it? It was respect, and what was the other one, Wally?
Trust.
Trust. Well, I told the story, maybe not to you guys, of last year. My captain came to me in the playoff game and said we had a female goalie and we had a male goalie, and the female goalie was a first year and the male goalie was the second year, and they played every other game. It was her game. And he came to me and he said, "Coach, the boys want the male goalie. I don't want to use their names. Wants him to play." And I said, "Well, it's not his turn." And I told those goalies that they're going to play every other game unless they were sick or whatever. And he goes, "But coach, we always start slow. We need the second year guy. We need him in there to hold us into the game until we get going. And besides that, if we lose, this might be the last time he plays at this level because he's moving up." And I go, "Well," I said, "do you trust me?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, but the guy," I go, "No, wait a minute. I gave my word to the goalies at the beginning of the season. I told you guys this is what we're going to do." And I said, "So why don't you go back in the locker room and fix the slow start thing?" And that's on you guys. That's not, you don't need a goalie to get you so you can warm up in the game. Get out there and get after it. And we had an ice cut between the second and third period, which we didn't normally have. And he came out and said to me, and we were winning the game at the time. And he said, "Good call, coach. Thank you." And so that young lady did an awesome job. And the other female on the team, a forward, this was Bantams, she scored the winning goal in overtime. And so, those kids all saw something that they hadn't seen before in terms of from a coach. And I think also from understanding, again, they're Bantams, so they're 14 and 15. They're not, they have their life experiences are not all that great. I mean, in terms of quantity. And so I just think it's how you step on the ice and how you treat the players. And they're smart. Kids are smart. By the time they're in high school, they've had 60 or 70, maybe 80 different hockey coaches impact their life. How are you gonna stand out? Same with you, Peter, at college. Oh my God, those kids have probably had 100 coaches before you get a hold of them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And for me, I mean, I think you create one of the most important aspects of trust. Creating trust is consistency. Rules have applied to everyone.